Brendan Smielowski/AFP/Getty. There are 4 people whom Hillary Clinton devotes good-sized chunks of her new book What Happened to criticizing. 3 of them are Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, and James Comey. The other one is Bernie Sanders. Clinton critiques Sanders in the book by name on many different issues, and she sometimes even goes out of her way to do it, reviving disputes from the campaign and portraying Sanders overall as hypocritical, disloyal, and unserious. Though she does occasionally praise him for having some good ideas. She attempts to cast some blame on Sanders for her defeat last fall, saying that during the primaries he resorted to innuendo and impugning my character in a way that caused lasting damage, and that he stayed in the race too long. Then she reiterates some of her own critiques of Sanders from the primary, calling him insufficiently committed to gun control and reproductive rights, and claiming his policy proposals aren't realistic. Finally, she says his theory for how to win over working-class white voters doesn't make sense, and argues that he's far too negative toward the Democratic Party. I am proud to be a Democrat and I wish Bernie were, too. At a time when much of the Democratic establishment has been working hard to make Sanders and his supporters feel included and represented in the party, Clinton has chosen to take the opposite approach. No unity or kumbaya for her. Clinton is making it very clear to all her supporters that she does not have a particularly high opinion of her old rival, and that she has no intention of papering over her differences with him from the 2016 primary. The book has been promoted as a candid tell-all in which, now that Clinton is finally out of politics for good, she will at last tell us she truly thinks. I've often felt I had to be careful in public, she writes in the introduction. Now I'm letting my guard down. But it's quite clear that Clinton isn't retreating to a comfortable retirement. She spends part of the book's last chapter promoting a new political action organization she started this year. At the very least, Clinton is using this book to position herself as a leading voice in the political arena for years to come. And it suggests she will keep using that voice to criticize Sanders and his rising influence. Near the end of the book, Clinton puts the lion's share of the blame for her defeat on then FBI Director James Comey's late intervention, arguing that she was set to win before that happened. She puts secondary blame on Russian interference, and earlier in the book she admits some of her own strategic mistakes. But she also claims Bernie Sanders did 2 specific things that hurt her. First of all, Clinton complains that Sanders disparaged her character with innuendo about her being corrupt and in hock to Wall Street and financial interests, and that these attacks stuck. She writes Bernie routinely portrayed me as a corrupt corporatist who couldn't be trusted. His clear implication was that because I accepted campaign donations from people on Wall Street, just as President Obama had done, I was bought and paid for. Because we agreed on so much, Bernie couldn't make an argument against me in this area on policy, so he had to resort to innuendo and impugning my character. His attacks caused lasting damage, making it harder to unify progressives in the general election and paving the way for Trump's crooked Hillary campaign. I don't know if that bothered Bernie or not. Secondly, she complains that Sanders stayed in the primary race long after it was clear he would lose and complains he waited too long to endorse her. Ultimately, none of this, her disadvantage in caucus states, mattered much after I built up a large delegate lead in March. What did matter, and had a lasting impact, was that Bernie's presence in the race meant that I had less space and credibility to run the kind of feisty progressive campaign that had helped me win Ohio and Pennsylvania in 2008. The delegate math hadn't been in question since March, but Bernie had hung on to the bitter end, drawing blood wherever he could along the way. I somewhat understood why he did it. After all, I stayed in the race for as long as I could in 2008. But that race was much closer, and I endorsed Barack right after the last primary. On this day in New York, Bernie was still more than a month away from endorsing me. These specific critiques don't strike me as convincing, because much of Sanders's behavior seems to be within normal boundaries for a tough primary and is indeed quite similar to what Clinton herself did in her 2008 run. She critiqued Barack Obama's ties to a slumlord donor and questioned whether he was ready to be president. She also stayed in the race through the last primary even though Obama had a clear delegate advantage, though she waited a few days to endorse him rather than over a month as Sanders did for her. Whatever damage